One of the major benefits about mesh Wi-Fi networks is how scalable they are. Whether you have simple or very demanding internet needs, you can scale your mesh Wi-Fi network to ensure you get good performance. When I'm talking about scaling here, what I'm referring to is adding nodes to your mesh Wi-Fi network, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to walk through the steps for how to add a mesh node to your mesh Wi-Fi network, and I'll also talk about why you would want to do so in the first place. So when should you add another node to your mesh Wi-Fi network? Well, as a reminder, each of these mesh nodes will broadcast your Wi-Fi signal. So if you have any dead spots in your current living situation, there are areas of your home where you don't get a strong Wi-Fi signal, you might want to look into adding another node. Maybe you live in a multi-level home, or maybe you move to a bigger home with more square footage. These are perfect examples of when another node might be a benefit to your mesh Wi-Fi network. I will say that before adding a node to your mesh Wi-Fi network, you're going to want to do a little bit of planning. You're going to want to plan out both the location of where this node is going to go and also the configuration of this node compared to the existing nodes in your home network. When it comes to the strategic location of this node that you're adding to your mesh network, there are a few things you have to keep in mind. Firstly, it needs to be implemented near a power outlet. Obviously, you need to power the device. Secondly, it needs to be within the Wi-Fi range of an existing node in your mesh network. After all, these devices, these nodes, all communicate with each other, so you need to be within that Wi-Fi range so that communication can happen. Lastly, you're obviously adding this node to your mesh Wi-Fi network because you have existing dead zones in your home. So the location of this node needs to be in a place where when it broadcasts its Wi-Fi signal, it provides that Wi-Fi signal and coverage to the existing dead zone in your home. If you're not covering the dead zone with the additional node, there's no point in adding a node in the first place. A good rule of thumb here is implementing this additional node halfway between an existing node in your home network and that dead zone. That way you can have communication with the other nodes in your mesh network and also provide a Wi-Fi signal to that dead zone. I have a TP-Link BE25 mesh node, and even in the documentation when you're adding nodes, it says to try not to add nodes more than 2 rooms away. Obviously, walls get in the way, they can distort the signal and the communication between the nodes, so you just want to keep that in mind. The next strategic piece to consider is the configuration of how you're going to add this node to your home network. What I'm talking about here is what's called backhaul, which is how your nodes communicate with each other. Now, there are 2 options here. They can communicate with each other wirelessly, which is the most convenient method, or you can use an Ethernet cable to connect them, and you might get a little bit better performance. So let's take a look at a few examples of what these configuration options are. First, let's look at the most common implementation, which is a wireless backhaul. Right now, here we have a main source node, which is connected to your modem. And let's say we want to add another node to our mesh network. So here we go. It's pretty straightforward. You add a node, they communicate wirelessly with each other, and this is a very flexible option because these 2 nodes don't need to be connected with an Ethernet cable. And keep in mind, there might be some situations where you physically can't or you don't want to connect your nodes with an Ethernet cable because it will get in the way. You don't want an Ethernet cable snaking throughout your home. So a wireless backhaul implementation will work just fine. But what happens if we want to add another node to our mesh network? Here's where you have a few more choices. The first implementation here, you can put it in a location where this additional node can communicate with your main node that's connected to your modem. And that way you have 2 nodes that are within the Wi-Fi range of your main node, and they can all communicate with each other through that main node. But what if implementing these 2 nodes within the Wi-Fi range of your main node doesn't provide you coverage for all the dead zones in your home? This third configuration implementation option is called daisy chaining, where the main node communicates with this satellite node, and then this satellite node communicates with this node. The one thing to keep in mind with these communications is if you're connected to this node and you want to access the internet, when you send a request to the internet, it's going from this node, through this node, through this node, to the internet. So with 3 nodes, it might not be the biggest deal, but if you have 5 nodes connected together, you might experience some latency or delay in your communications just because of all these hops in communications that need to happen in order to send your request to the internet. In summary, the wireless backhaul method is the most convenient option, and chances are you'll still get great performance as long as you don't have too many nodes daisy chained together. In terms of the other backhaul option, the next one is a wired backhaul, and that's using an Ethernet cable to connect the nodes in your home network. So if we want to add a mesh node, pretty simple and straightforward here. You use an Ethernet cable to connect one node to the main node, and then you get seamless communication. In general, Ethernet cable communications are more reliable and they're faster than Wi-Fi communications, so you get the maximum benefit if you can connect your nodes with an Ethernet cable. If you want to add another node to this configuration, you can connect both of these nodes directly to the main node, or you have the option of putting them in a daisy chain configuration as well. Again, this is a more complicated implementation because you're connecting all these nodes with an Ethernet cable. That's not feasible for everybody, but in daisy chaining these nodes together with an Ethernet cable, you're going to get great performance. You won't see any delay in your communications simply because all the communications between these nodes through the Ethernet cable will be super fast without any delay. Another more complicated implementation here is if you don't want to experience delay and you're daisy chaining a lot of nodes together, even if the communication between the main node and the next node in the chain is wireless, you can connect the other additional nodes with an Ethernet cable, and this will minimize any delay that you might experience if you're daisy chaining a lot of nodes together. I know that's a lot to chew on. There are a lot of configuration options when it comes to adding a node to your mesh network. I'd love to see in the comments section what configuration you're using and also what kind of performance you're getting out of that configuration. Once you've made a decision about the location and the configuration of this additional node you're adding to your mesh Wi-Fi network, we're finally ready to add it. So the first thing we need to do, again, I have a TP-Link BE25 device, so I need to open up the TP-Link Deco app in order to add this node. You should have already downloaded the Deco app in order to set up your additional main node that's connected to your modem. But if you haven't, go ahead and do that now just to make sure we're on the same page. Once you've downloaded the Deco app, the first thing we have to do, let's go into the app and log in. To add a node, we need to hit the plus sign in the top right here. We're going to go add a Deco unit. Here you'll get a few configuration suggestions from TP-Link. If you have 1 floor, 2 floor, 3 floors, that's a suggested location for implementing your nodes. I live on 1 floor. That's great. We'll hit next. We want to place our mesh nodes out in the open so they can broadcast their Wi-Fi network without obstruction. Got it. We'll move to the next piece here. You want to implement your node away from large electrical appliances. That way, either the Wi-Fi or Ethernet signal is not affected by electromagnetic interference. Got it. The next thing we need to do is plug in our Deco unit and wait for the LED light on the bottom of the Deco device, which is this. That you can see it's green here, but we need to wait for it to turn blue on this additional device that we're setting up. So let's look into doing that now. I'm going to be adding this node wirelessly with a wireless backhaul, but let's take a look at what it would look like if I was implementing a wired backhaul. It's pretty straightforward here. I have an Ethernet cable that came with the device. This is the node I'm adding to my existing mesh network. You take one end of the Ethernet cable, plug it into an Ethernet port. You have 2 to choose from. It doesn't matter which one you use. Have that click so this is connected. And then you literally just take the other end of the Ethernet cable and you connect it to an open Ethernet port on the main Deco unit itself. One of the Ethernet ports is taken because this Deco is connected to my modem with an Ethernet cable, so we'll use the other open Ethernet port. Now you would just plug in this device, wait for it to boot up, and you'd be good to go. But because I'm implementing a wireless backhaul, we can unplug this Ethernet cable for now, and I'll go take this additional unit, plug it into the location that I want to, and wait for it to boot up. Okay, the node is pulsing blue, so we'll hit next, looking for Deco. Okay, it says Deco BE25 found. We want to add this device. You identify the room that it's in, let's say living room. Applying settings, and now this node has been added to your mesh Wi-Fi network. Select done. And now on the home screen, you can see with these two icons, you can see that there are two nodes as part of your existing mesh Wi-Fi network. The key here now with this node added is you want to test to make sure that it's covering that Wi-Fi dead zone that you meant to cover by adding this node. Keep in mind that there might be some instances where you need to add an additional node in order to entirely cover that dead zone, but you just want to double check. Maybe moving the location of this additional node will help solve that problem. So you just want to check those things before you consider this job done. But at this point, you should be all set. You know the process for adding a node to your mesh network. So go ahead, play around with the configuration until you get an optimal setup for your home network. As always, thanks for watching this episode from Network from Home, and we'll catch you on the next one.